Hello and welcome to this episode of Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kizma. I'm Nick, and this is a very special episode because we're going to learn today how to be ultra spiritual with the ultra spiritual guy himself, JP Sears.
Welcome to the Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kizma, bringing you ancient wisdom for modern day success so that you can sparkle just a little bit brighter each and every day. If what you hear speaks to your soul, go ahead and give us a rating and a review in iTunes. You can also find us on SoundCloud and Stitcher. And hey, if there's somebody in your life that you think would enjoy this podcast, go ahead and share it with them.
Well, hello, Kizma.
Hello.
How was your week?
My week was awesome, and it's actually just really crazy awesome today because of who we have on Illumination Podcast.
And who do we have on Illumination Podcast? I'm super excited.
I know. So everyone listening, you know how much we're all about the grounded spirituality and the teachings and whatever. Well, we have the most amazing, awesome guest, the ultra spiritual JP Sears. And I know many of you know him, and I know you watch his YouTube channel, and you're going to hear about a book coming out. But JP Sears is truly, I have to say, one of the most innovative, funny, enlightening and inspiring spiritual teachers and healing coaches out there. And I could go on for an hour, but I'd rather just get him right here and hanging with us.
Yeah, I would love that too.
Yes.
I mean, because as soon as you reached out and JP accepted the interview, we started geeking out on his his
we've
videos.
Always geeked out on his
we
videos.
always geek out, but we definitely we dove a little deeper into the archive. And we are super excited to invite on JP Sears.
Yeah.
So JP, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome, guys. Thank you so much for having me on. And I appreciated that intro where you guys were talking about me like I wasn't here. It reminds me of my childhood being with my parents. So I feel like this very painful yet comfortable sense of invisibility.
Oh, we don't want you to be invisible, my dear. That's hilarious.
So happy to be on with you guys.
Oh, thanks. Well, you have been an intriguing figure, person, human that we've been watching for a while. And I think one of the reasons you're so intriguing is that what you say, even through your very funny YouTube videos or your interviews, there's such a sense of truth. I know you're not fooling anyone. You know what you're talking about. So I guess, to start this off, my question to you is when did you pop into the ultra spiritual guy from, I know, which was probably very profound work. I know you coach people, you help with emotional healing. But I'm curious, was there a moment that it was a mistake that somebody said something so ridiculous you started to laugh? Or did you just gradually go into the ultra spiritual? Or is this just you? Did you come out of your mother's, this funny?
Come out of my mother's what?
Her vagina.
Oh, I'm offended that you would name a part of the human body. I think we should have much more shame about our bodies. Yeah, great question. The on-camera version of the ultra spiritual character came out about 2 years ago, a little over that. But I think the formation of the character, it was 2004 that I moved actually to your guys' neck of the woods, Southern California, Carlsbad. And I was originally from Ohio. So moving to the very kind of ultra spiritual place, Southern California, yoga, self-realization, meditation gardens. I became indoctrinated in the spiritual world, and it was a very important world for me and very helpful and growthful. And it took me probably 10 years to realize that I'm also losing myself on the path where I'm finding myself. So I think my spiritual journey, if you will, has been great, but also it took me a while to realize my ultra spiritual journey, kind of like how I was using my ego to or using my spiritual practice to gratify my ego while just calling it my spiritual practice. So there was a bit of a progressive awakening to essentially how I was losing myself. And that awakening is essentially what I portray in the videos with my ultra spiritual character.
Yeah, you're brilliant. He's brilliant. I wasn't sure who was. I'm just going to call you one and the same. I don't really know. Like, I was a little nervous, when we talked with Karen, I was like, I wanted to ask, well, which one are we interviewing? But it's one and the same and in and out and just pretty brilliant with it all.
Yeah, we definitely had a conversation about that. Who exactly are we interviewing? And
and that's what I ask myself every morning when I wake up, like, oh, who am I going to get today? But yeah, I think it's a great conversation to have. And kind of like you were alluding to, it is one and the same. I mean, my ultra spiritual character, it's not really an act. It's just a part of me that I amplify on the screen, a part of me that's always had a very satirical sense of humor. So when I'm in just my normal mode, I'm relatively, I just talk about myself because I'm narcissistic, but I'm relatively fluid, in and out of sincerity and comedy. They're kind of like two different parts that help make the whole of me.
Yeah, I love it. Tell me about Ohio, because I grew up in Ohio.
Which part of Ohio?
Oh, golly. It's called Steubenville, Ohio.
Which Steubenville? I've heard of it. Where is that?
It's frightening. No, it's close. It's in the Ohio Valley near Pittsburgh. So I used to be a musician. My mom would drive me to Pittsburgh for my flute lessons every week. But I saw something in your information about Columbus, and both my sisters live there. Yeah.
So a lot of my call it my emotional healing work training was done in Columbus, Ohio, with an organization called Journeys of Wisdom. Beautiful, beautiful angel inside of a human body named John McMullen runs that. But I didn't live in Columbus. I lived about 2 hours north in a super small town called Bowling Green, Ohio.
No, I was supposed to go to college in Bowling Green, and I ended up going to Boston instead.
And not too far from Michigan.
Right.
I grew up in Michigan.
Oh, very cool.
Little Midwesterns.
Yeah.
Wow. We are acting like we're something more than where we came from.
Yeah,
I like
that's true. I love it. Yeah. I went to some band camp in Bowling Green, but yeah, Ohio. So it is different. I mean, when we landed in California about 4 or 5 years ago, we moved from Michigan. We had a yoga studio in Grosse Pointe, sold it, came here, but I had been all over the world before then and lived many years in Asia. But I remember that sense too, like coming to Southern California and just kind of going, like, is this it? Is like people are saying some interesting stuff, and we've been studying, we've gone to India, all this, but something was a little different. I don't know, Nick, if you, you know what I mean? Like, I think it took us a year to figure out if we actually were the aliens, or there were or everybody was the alien.
I started to think that we were crazy. Were crazy. I had missed something really big in my spiritual practice, throughout there in my spiritual understanding through all this. And then what I came to realize is that, it's not all me.
Yeah, I like that. And can I ask what made you guys decide to move from Michigan to Carlsbad?
California.
Mm-hmm. It's like Detroit or San Diego. Detroit, San Diego. We love Detroit. We have great friends there, but we would come out to do some work out here, and it was like, oh, this is awesome. My daughter graduated high school, and we just hit the road.
Yeah. It was time for a new adventure for us.
That makes sense. You had me at Detroit versus San Diego. I guess that is a no-brainer. Yeah, for me, Southern California was and is a very different world than Ohio. And to me, when I moved out to California, I was 23. It took me a while. Like, I went through this disillusionment period where I was like settling into like, what is California? Because I had the kind of like this big story in my mind. What is California? Which is pretty much just formed from movies, TV, and my imagination. And I think a lot of people do that with California, probably more than any other place, just because so many movies and TV shows portray this area, maybe not as it is, but it's portrayed in a very sort of, I don't know, archetypal, come out and find the promised land sort of deal. And for me, it took me a while to realize like, oh, there's just normal people out here.
Mm-hmm.
And they might wear more mala beads. They might do yoga more. And they might tell me they're more spiritual, but they are just normal people. It's like there's cultural differences. So, and I love that. I love kind of just seeing the humans wherever I'm going, not seeing like the identities and roles that we play and the characters that we play. Because like to me, that like I feel disconnected from people when I'm, hallucinating so hard that I think they're different than me. So yeah, it took me probably a year or so to kind of like wiggle in and feel like, I'm planted in the actual soil here rather than trying to fish for what I thought California was or is, even when I was living here.
Wow, that's a great way to put it, the hallucinating so hard.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a sense of disillusionment, and I'm curious about that. Like, I know what that feels like to me, and sometimes I go into kind of like a judgmental or even a spiteful kind of mode. And I'm wondering, no, the dark yogi would never do that. But what I'm curious is did you go through any of that? Like your ultra spiritual guy has, it's the satire behind it, like the parody of the spiritualism. Was there ever a hint of spitefulness underneath it, or did it always come from a loving and joyous space?
Yeah, man, I would love to pretend that it's just all like loving, joyful space and like super fuzzy teddy bears, love and light, bliss. And that would actually be a very ultra spiritual answer about the ultra spiritual question. But yeah, it comes from my shadow. So there is pain involved there. And, and anger, spite is certainly a dimension of that. And, so yeah, let's see what that pain is about. So I think a lot of it was the pain of losing myself, losing myself on the path that I was taking to find myself. That pissed me off. Mm-hmm. And it really pissed me off that I didn't know I was losing myself. It's like one thing if I'm losing myself and I know it. It's another thing of like, wow, I lost myself 8 years ago and I didn't see me losing myself. So it's like disillusionment, confusion, feeling unnerved. It's like, wow, yeah, that's a very fearful, angry experience to have, necessary. But I think like the turmoil of that is sort of like the space between what I thought was versus what is. And, and I think dimensions of that pain were, I made up a story who I'm supposed to be to the world. And who I was supposed to be to the world was, very enlightened. There I hear the coaster
Train of truth
going up and down the 101. I love it. I made up this story. I'm supposed to be enlightened. I should probably be levitating here in the next few years. That'll be good.
Moving things with your mind. Don't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think I just made you say that with my mind.
I think you did. I felt it. I really felt it.
And, who I was supposed to be to other people, not just the world, and who other people were supposed to be to me. So, I had, I keep saying, like I wonder why I do that. Like I'm trying to.
I think it's ultra spiritual, the knowingness of it all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm telling you guys what you already know, So, and I think part of my pain and disillusionment was some of the quote unquote spiritual mentors I had. Like I figured out they're actually human beings with their own crap, their own wounds, their own issues. But when I started the game of my self-growth and my spiritual development, I was delusional enough to think that my mentors and other people had all their stuff together, that they were, just tuned in, they're enlightened, and like I needed them to be these omnipresent, stable people, kind of like, well, gosh, wanting them to be the parents that I never had. So, gosh darn it, apparently I'm the only one that projects my childhood issues onto mentors. So, coming to I think a connection with more reality rather than that fictitious reality of who I wanted them to be, who I wanted me to be, was a shattering process, and it was painful. And the ultra spiritual videos were and are still a way, I think, that I process that pain and the disillusionment. They're also a way I shine the light on my shadow, my hiding places. So those videos really are a method of therapy that I use to help myself be more okay with my crap, my issues, and really my humanness.
Well, I think they're done brilliantly. And they've got this, like, you have a really beautiful way of kind of softening the blows around it. But what I'm curious is do you get haters from it? Do you ever get haters that are just like, offended by that truth being exposed? Because I think I think it's clear that you speak a lot of truth through those. And I can see that being uncomfortable for some people who are really entrenched in that.
Yeah, well, if people get offended by my videos, and I'm offended that they're offended by my videos, and how dare they have their free will and experience them the way they want to?
Well, as you should be.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm offended for you.
Thank you. I feel supported in my victimhood. Thank you. Yeah, I'm surprised I don't get more haters. So I would say, yes, there are some, and it's a shockingly low percentage. And I am a fan of believing that whenever we get offended, it's actually a therapeutic posture that we've just put ourselves in psychologically, where we are looking at something that has some degree of truth for us that we don't want to be true. And I think our offended or defended reaction is, it's a reaction of anger at what we don't want to be true that maybe is true for us, or at least we think it's true at a deeper level. So it's kind of like, to me, the videos, I do intend for them to be a mirror for people to look into and essentially say, hey, do you see yourself in any of this behavior that I'm acting out? Not accusing you, but I'm saying, like, do you see any of yourself in it? And when people get angry when they're looking in the mirror, it's helpful for me to remember they are angry at who's looking in the mirror, even if they think they're angry at the mirror. So to be honest with you, I come from I think a very dysfunctional people-pleasing mentality. That's how I got my emotional needs met as a kid. Let me just please the crap out of everybody so I can feel like I'm something to people. And I very intentionally do my best to not abide by that when I do my best not to abide by that in most of my life. I'm not perfect with it, but certainly my art, my videos. So I don't want to rob people from feeling offended if that's what they need to feel. I don't want to play it safe and dilute down anything I do in the videos out of fear of people feeling offended. I mean, to me, that's like, oh, I'm afraid of people actually connecting with something about themselves that they're out of touch with. So let me be afraid of that happening. And I also realize, all those perspectives I just shared on why we get offended and why some viewers / haters would get offended, that could all just sound like a rationalization to justify like someone being mean. Like, yeah, I'm going to intentionally hurt people with a video, but I'll just call it like a therapeutic way of them getting in touch with an insecurity they have inside. So I hope that's not true, but I realize, well, that could be a slippery slope I'm tricking myself into sliding down. Yet with that said, to me, we don't get offended by anything that we feel secure about. I think we only get offended when we have an insecurity that comes up and we feel insecure with that insecurity. That's why we get angry. But I think when we're actually just feeling insecure rather than insecure with the insecurity, that's a place of vulnerability. And I think sometimes we need to react to the insecurity, anger, before we can get to the place of vulnerability, because I think underneath any insecurity is a part of us that within our psyche, we've cut that part of us out of our lives. We've thrown it in the basement and said, you're not welcome in my life because I don't feel secure with what I think you are and what feelings you hold. So with that said, I welcome people to feel offended if that's what's going to help them, actually.
I love that. That's such a great enlightened answer, actually. My question for you, outside of this, of the work that you do with the ultra spiritual videos, is there anything that's really offending you right now in the world? I know at least this country, we're going through some interesting times and things like that. Does it boil up in you? Is there a specific cause that you're like, I got to do something about this?
Yeah, there is. In fact, it's very synchronous. That's a very spiritual word I just used, by the way.
Yeah, we'll hashtag that later.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it if you guys would appreciate my use of the word synchronous. But just this morning, I was filming some footage for a video. It'll probably be the next video I release, and it's going to be called How to Be Offended. So it's just really the nature of our conversation. And I'm making that video, one, because I feel called to. And I don't really know why I feel called to, but if I pretend like I know why I feel called to, it's because I believe a lot of us, probably including me, are losing ourselves to our offensiveness. I think there's so many of us that have become connoisseurs of outrage, and we give our power away and become overly offended. Maybe not in a therapeutic sense, but it's like when our modus operandi becomes, I'm going to get offended by everything. I think it means we're really in a place of giving our power away. We're making other people responsible for how we feel about ourselves. And it's like, how dare you have your free will and say your perspective? How dare you not see things my way? That's a slippery slope. So in a way, I would say I get offended that people get so offended so often. And I get offended? I don't know, maybe, but I feel concerned about that.
I love that word, concern. I mean, it's like, it's such a focused stream of energy towards the negative. And to me, it's sort of like, I know you did a video on being a vegan, and then you have your amazing gluten-free things. And when you eat something gluten, but I look at it as like, I remember being in a small tribe of people who were vegan, I don't know, maybe 8-10 years ago, and they hated the meat eaters. And I was like scratching my head, like, is there something wrong here? Like, if you're loving the animals, why are you going to hate another human? And I think things get triggered in people and they direct their emotions, and it does become this sort of addiction to the drama and the trauma, or perhaps they just don't have that knowing inside of how to do something for themselves. So they're directing it outward. So I love that your next video is going to be about how to be offended.
Yeah. Well, awesome. One of the most destructive things that I see with it is it shuts down actual conversations.
Yeah.
It's like it's being offended becomes an excuse for just not having a real conversation or actually doing any kind of inquiry. And I think that's the worst thing that could happen.
Yeah, I agree. Man, I love that you just said that. For me too, it is a trump card. No, sorry for the play on words, but it's a trump card people play that absolutely closes down communication, and closed down communication equals disconnection. And I think disconnection is essentially the root of all problems in our personal worlds and maybe the global world. I know that kind of trivializes things, maybe oversimplifies them, and maybe it's actually not oversimplified enough. So I think open communication, where we're willing to own our own emotional reaction rather than blaming someone for how we made ourselves feel, is so important so that we can have more communication for the purpose of creating more connection in our lives. I think the more disconnection we feel, or the more disconnection we have, the absolute worse we feel. And the worse we feel, the more offended we get by anything, because we're looking to dump the worst feelings we have inside onto something other than ourselves. So let me dump that on Donald Trump or my ex-girlfriend or current girlfriend, whoever it is. And then okay, so I was disconnected. I feel terrible. Then I dump those feelings onto someone else because I'm trying to escape them. And now I've done that. And now I'm even more disconnected. Nobody's ever created enhanced relationships through being a connoisseur of offendedness. So now we feel even worse. So now we have more bad feelings to dump on people. So it becomes a very downward spiral. And I don't think anybody can get us out of it other than us. I think we have to be very, very ambitious in our willingness to take radical self-responsibility of two things: how the hell we feel and how the hell we are experiencing life, how we perceive life. I think it comes through the powerful hand of our own self. And I think Nelson Mandela said something along the lines of, people are far more afraid of their power than they are of weakness or of fear. Yes. And I would agree. Yeah. That's why people love to give their power away and be offended by anything and pretend that their perception is created by something else and pretend that their feelings are created by someone else. It's a huge amount of power that we claim when we step into the responsibility of our feelings and our perceptions, in my opinion.
Oh, I love that. And it's so true. I mean, I know I say to our tribe a lot, like, not to be morbid, but our time on this planet's like a whisper. It really is. Yeah. It's so short. And when we get to the end of it, to glance back and think that we gave so much away, rather than to build so much within, I think will be truly devastating, So I love your words. It's really spot on.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And I love your guys' perspectives as well. And something specific about, what offends me, aside from people being offended, is the Standing Rock situation, to be honest with you. I won't say I feel offended by that, because I think that's too watered down. I feel angry about it. I really do. And I think, yes, the external circumstance of the water, the earth, and the Native American people not only being potentially compromised, but probably compromised if the pipeline goes in.
Right.
It doesn't feel okay with me at all. And I realize there is something about me that I project onto that. I don't want to just sit here and feel angry and say, damn it, Trump, he reinstated the pipeline and a jerk. So I'm not going to approve of what he's doing with that. But I also realize my emotional reaction is created by me, and it's something about me. And I think what that is actually what comes up for me. There's been plenty of times in my life, especially as a child and a teenager, I didn't stand up for myself. I didn't represent who I am. I gave myself away trying to become who I thought other people wanted me to be so that I could get their approval. So I really didn't stand up for myself. And I think the situation of Standing Rock is a very clear mirror reflecting that to me. Like, I see the Native American people, and then I see like this big authoritarian character called the government not standing up for these true, authentic people. And it's like, wow, that is really reminding me about issues that I still probably need to bring more resolve to. How this authoritarian called the conscious part of me didn't stand up for the true JP. I sold my soul for the currency of approval. And is the government selling the soul of the Native American people, the water and the earth, for the currency of money? Maybe, but I've got to own what comes up for me.
Well, that to me just seems like the most powerful form of activism that there could ever be.
Yeah.
Is being a true activist for yourself in that sense. And whatever cause, this is my personal opinion, is like whatever cause you pitch up outside of that is awesome. It's entirely your business. But I think you're so much more powerful in that work when you actually take the time to deal with your own self, so that you can actually really be so much more grounded in the actual work rather than in your indignation or in your anger.
Absolutely. And in my opinion, which by the way, I'm I have no problem with people being angry. I think it's a powerful emotion. And I think we get the light side of that power when we can, represent ourselves and own our experience of it. I think the power can work against us if we're just in that place of indignation and it's all about other people. And I think when we get angry about an issue and don't own our experience of it, and we step into that indignation phase and stay there, we become the problem. The problem that we see someone else, whatever, like Trump's a bully, he's a mean person, inconsiderate, then we actually act out that exact same behavior that we think he's acting out. Is he acting it out? Who knows? We all have our perception. And I think it's interesting how we become that which we despise the most while being blind to it. And I think one of the reasons why we unconsciously love to do that is it gives us a sense of control. If we see someone being mean to someone else, Trump being mean to Muslims or the Native Americans, then we become mean to Trump. And that gives us a sense of control. Like, I am the mean one now. Mm-hmm. I'm going to just see him as the mean one, but I'm going to act out mean energy psychologically, maybe physically, so that I can feel in control. Because if I let him be the mean one and I'm just sitting here peacefully, I feel surrendered, not in control. So for me, going for the sweet spot of surrender rather than just trying to control. I think control just creates destruction. I think surrender, not passivity, not indifference, but surrender, where we stand for what we are rather than crusading against what we're not. To me, it's very important.
I love that. I watched one of your older videos where someone wrote in about, I think it was a relationship question, and you talked about surrendering in a really beautiful way. And I was like, wow, that is something I think people don't truly understand. It's not a giving in. It's not giving away your truth. It's actually claiming more of your truth back into you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's a scary psychological posturing to be in. I think surrender is what our spirit self would say, yeah, that's where life comes from. And our ego would say, ooh, control is where life comes from. Yeah. And the spirit would say, ooh, control is what ends my life. And I think the ego would say, ooh, surrender is what ends my life. Right. And I do think we have to be willing to scare ourselves to death in order to truly live our life rather than just survive our life. You know, living a life of survival versus a life of thrival, which is a new word a friend of mine, Kyle Cease, made up.
Oh, Kyle, he's funny. He's great.
Yeah, he's beautiful.
That's great. You're traveling now. We know that How to Be Ultra Spiritual, which is your book that's coming out early March, I think. Is it like March 6th, 7th? I've pre-ordered mine.
Yes, March 7th. Thank you for the pre-order.
Yeah.
Appreciate you.
And there'll definitely be links on the show notes, everyone. But tell us a little bit about what is How to Be Ultra Spiritual. Who's writing this book besides the self?
Yeah, so the book, which I put my heart and soul into, this has been a very meaningful project for me. So the book is written completely from my ultra spiritual character's perspective. So it's a comedy book, and the comedy, in my delusional opinion, it's embedded with deeper messages. To me, the language of humor is one of connection. When we hear a perspective with humor, I think we can consider that perspective a little bit deeper rather than, kind of the old unconscious. We reject new perspectives if they're just kind of told at us. So I wanted to share a lot of my perspectives through the language of humor. And for me, the deeper messages embedded within the entertainment and the humor of the book are advocating us to consider, what am I holding on to that served me but no longer serves me, as well as encouraging the reader to unapologetically step deeper into their true self.
That's great. I love it. I can't wait. I mean, if just, when you think about if just a small percentage of the population stepped in stronger to their true self, what would shift on the planet? I mean, it's all pretty amazing.
It is, yeah. When I know that you take clients and you work with people, do they have trouble kind of transitioning from the comedy persona into like real conversations? You know, because one of the things I think that you're doing that so brilliantly is really like the laughter and the kind of sense of humor around our own human absurdities. You know, which is it's brilliant, because just like you just said, I think you put it so nicely, is that it softens the blows, it softens that space where we can actually really consider it a little bit deeper when we laugh a little bit. But do you find, is that something that you bring into when you work with people, or do they have any trouble kind of transitioning from that persona into like real and deep conversations?
Yeah, you know, and for me, humor is a language that has more benefit in larger groups. So whether it's a big audience I'm talking to, or a video that I'm doing that ultimately talks to a bigger audience, humor works well there. It really does. I think it's a great tool to use in those environments. But in a therapeutic sense, the smaller the audience, like getting down to one person here for a one-on-one session, I think humor can actually work against the person in the situation, where it can become a tool of deflection rather than a tool of connection. So in one-on-one settings, it's not at all my mission. Oh, let's make someone laugh here. No, I mean, there might be small little bits of humor here or there, and maybe not. But to me, it's much more of a sincere, intimate, emotionally intimate setting. And I think humor, it's a powerful energy. It has the power for connection and the power for disconnection. And I like to be very mindful of when this tool will facilitate connection, when this tool will facilitate disconnection. So it doesn't take up much surface area in the one-on-one sessions I do. And the other part of the question you threw at me, do people, new clients have trouble adjusting? Some do, yet it's a relatively quick adjustment. And I love when people are honest, like, JP, I was called to do this session and I don't know what the heck to expect. And I said, great, me either. I'm not, let's kind of like figure this out rather than just trying to figure out what to expect. Like, oh, let's just experience it. And we sink in pretty quick to the realms of the mind and heart. And in fact, I really enjoy and I value when people kind of show up like, I see you funny on screen and I don't know what to expect in this one-on-one environment, but I was called to do it anyway. That's awesome. I think sometimes when we show up somewhere with expectations, it's more comfortable because we have a sense of certainty, even though that certainty may have zero correlation to the truth. But we have this sense of certainty. We feel comfortable. And I think that sense of certainty, those expectations, can become a membrane that closes us off and separates us from the actual connective experience we need to have. So when people show up relatively uncomfortable without much sense of certainty, to me, that means they're open. There's no membrane of expectations that we've got to work to pierce before we can actually start doing the work.
Right. And that's to me, that's the most important transition to get to some of the deeper layers. It's extraordinary the amount that the average human being walks around with, and the level of presence that's needed to actually just sit with that, not necessarily to confront it or destroy it or anything like that, but to really just to actually be with it. And so right on. I really appreciate the way you articulated that how humor can actually distract from that. I found the same thing myself, where I want to be funny. I want everybody to have a good time. But at the same time, it's like we have work to do. And it's really important to be present to that. Yeah.
For sure. And I think even like during deep work, sometimes I think we can, we're doing deep work and now I'm in a little bit of a hypnotic trance because the work is deep And then therefore it's like threatening to my ego. It's getting pretty intimate and connective. I'm looking at things about myself that I've spent 30 years trying not to see. So we can kind of be in a dissociative state. And like then in times like that, like a little bit of humor brought in can be a pattern interrupt that brings us back to the present moment.
Yeah. I heard that word and before you said it. You're doing that thing with my mind again, that pattern interrupt.
Well, you're welcome. You're welcome. And right now I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 3. What number do you think that is?
Actually, I was thinking 8. Gosh, I missed that
That's
one.
exactly what it is. That's exactly.
JP, where do you call home? I know you have your own like parallel universe that you probably pop in and out of, but where on this planet do you call home?
Yeah, well, I like the Pleiadian galaxy. It's nice this time of year. Even though it's like in a future year. My house is in Charleston, South Carolina.
Oh my gosh.
I've lived there the past 3 years.
How lovely.
And that's where my house is. And sometimes I'm traveling so much that it's like, well, it doesn't feel like I live there. Yeah. But I absolutely love it in Charleston.
That's cool. It's another similarity. Back in my musician days, I would do the Spoleto Festival. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Cool. Yeah, I was just at the festival, I don't know, a few months ago, end of summer, I think it was.
Yeah, I did 3 summers there and 3 summers in Spoleto, Italy. So I have really fond memories. And I played in Savannah Symphony just down the I-95. Wow. So yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Is it I-95 there or is it the I-95?
It's not the 95, it's I-95.
Yeah, we on the East Coast don't know what the before road means. It's I-95.
And I have perhaps the most important question of the interview. It's very deep for me, and I'm just dying to know, when and why did you choose purple for your T-shirt?
Yeah, there wasn't much conscious choice that went into it. I don't like to make decisions based on what I think. It's usually kind of like a quick follow the feelings. So I was getting ready to film the first comedy video, How to Be Ultra Spiritual. And I was, new age, purple. Let me grab this purple shirt. And then, very last second, I said, kind of a headband with a flower was
the green headband.
Yeah. And, the camera was already out. Everything was all set up. And then I was like, okay, let's grab the headband. Let's see if that works. And so, there not much premeditation went into it. But after the first video, which I thought was just going to be a one-time thing, I'm just kind of the blind man stumbling along. I think not having much premeditated notion of where I'm going allows me to see better where I'm going, kind of like leading with my heart rather than my expectations, if you will. So it was a couple of weeks after I released the first video. I remember waking up. I was still in bed. I'm like, I could make other videos like this. It's just like, it feels like there's this infinite well of material that I can express through this perspective. And like, I started to discover like, I think I'm creating a character, or sort of like giving birth to a character that lives inside of me. And then, as I sort of just sat with it, like the purple shirt, the headband, I'm like, okay, those are characteristics of the character. So I don't know. I like to say the purple shirt found me.
Sort of the violet flame shirt arrived.
Yes.
I personally think it's a deep subconscious allusion to the Joker, right? Isn't that the Joker's colors from the Batman?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. I love it. I mean, also, I don't know if this is actually part of it, but maybe one of my he's become just an amazing friend, and he's been a mentor for 13 or so years, a guy named John McMullen. He runs Journeys of Wisdom, the place we mentioned at the very beginning of the conversation. And he always wore purple. And it's kind of like, I think that embedded in me, like, spiritual people wear purple.
Nice high frequency.
It might have been just during a recent visit. I went and spent Christmas with he and his wife. And I think he might have actually said, are you making fun of me wearing the purple shirt? And I said, I think so. Yeah.
That's hilarious. I'm sure he took it really well. It's funny because I was just wondering, Do you ever miss the Midwest? I mean, you're on the East Coast now in the South. We're here. I know we love California, but oftentimes we think we haven't, in the Midwest, you develop these really strong friendships. At least we did, like in the Detroit area. I still keep touch with people back from Ohio. In California, everybody seems to be doing their thing. They're in their gig, right? They're in their flow.
Yeah. And to me, it's beautiful being around people in their flow. It really is. It's inspiring, seeing inspired people. And there's this nostalgia, the pain for the past. And I would say I certainly miss people. I miss friends, even though I'll talk to them on the phone, and that's great. And I'll see them maybe a couple times a year, maybe sometimes a little more often. And my family, my mom, my dad, my sister, brother-in-law, and 3 beautiful nieces and nephews. I miss them. However, the actual kind of culture, if you will, of Ohio, like whatever, farmland and
cows, lots of cows.
Cows and soybeans is fairly traditional. I don't think I really miss that.
Yeah, gotcha.
I miss the people.
Agree. I think that's what I would feel the same. We miss a lot of friends back in Michigan. I miss people that I grew up with and family. But yeah, and then you're by the beach and you're like, wow, the earth is so beautiful. It's like, we are really blessed.
There's a lot to experience leaving home, preaching to the choir. And, I think it would be a little sociopathic to not have some degree of nostalgia for
sure,
where we came from in terms of people and maybe the land, maybe both.
Yeah, totally. Oh, I love that. Before we tell everyone how to grab your book, I have another question. I ask everybody we interview this. It's one of my favorite questions, but what is it, if anything, you really want to do that you've yet to tell another human being?
Ooh, that's a beautiful question. I'm just going to take 12 minutes of silence so people know how deep and contemplative I am.
Tune back in 12, everyone.
That's a great question. Honestly, what comes up for me is I would love to, honestly, I guess a vow of silence. And the vow, that seems a little bit like a self-imposed prison, but I would like to be very disconnected and silent for a week. I mean, no Facebook, no anything. I mean, so disconnected that it probably scares me. Like, I don't have any distractions. I think that would be very therapeutic for me. I would guess it'd be scary as hell for the first little while. But I think that's been something I've been wanting, and I don't think I've verbalized it. Probably even haven't even acknowledged it in my own thoughts.
Okay. Well, I hope you attain some of that soon, or whenever it's best.
I'm going to start the silence right now.
Okay. Just keep breathing. Okay. Tell our listeners where they can find your book.
Yeah, dear listeners, I appreciate you even considering whether or not to grab my book. If you're so moved to do so, a great place you can get it is howtobeultraspiritual.com. You can certainly also get it Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of those beautiful places you love to be. But howtobeultraspiritual.com is a great one.
Cool. We'll have that in the show notes. Do you have any book signing events coming up in California in the near future?
Yes, I do. They are, let's see, I believe end of March, beginning of April is when I'll be out here. I'll be doing California-wise, I think San Francisco, LA, and then also wanting to add actually Encinitas to that as well. Cool. And I think people have this already scheduled for me. It's probably in my schedule for sure. I just haven't really cognized.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, cool. But y'all are welcome to check out awakenwithjp.com. I have an events page, which those events should be up there, maybe even as soon as right now.
Okay, beautiful. And of course, Awaken with JP on YouTube is just for Happyville, it's the place to go. really.
Yeah, it really is.
Oh, thank you.
I noticed that your team works really well together. Did they even bother telling you things, or do they just beam it directly into your head?
No, they're actually trying to shut me out of my own work in my own company. They're like, JP, your videos will be probably better if you're not a part of them anymore. These interviews will be better if your offensive personality isn't really active. So I think they're trying to squeeze me out.
Cool. Well, we'll hear more about that later, I'm sure.
Yeah, like they're trying to assassinate me. How powerful would it feel? Like, oh, people are trying to assassinate me. It's like, not kill me, but assassinate me. That means I'm an important person.
Oh, it's probably going to be poison, one of those flowers in your headband. So just watch out. Okay, who gives you those?
Like my paranoia is escalating already. Thank you.
Now we know where to look if you get poisoned.
All right, let's erase all that because we don't want that going out there. But seriously, before we sign off, any last tip or two that you want to share with the planet?
Yeah, aim to be who you are, not who you want to be, not who you think you are. But to me, aim for the discovery of who you are.
Nice. Love it.
That's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
To close it out.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate you guys asking, and so appreciate you guys having me on your show. Thank you so much.
Thank you, JP Sears, the ultra spiritual guy. Just great having you and wishing you massive success, enlightenment, happiness, and just thank you for being part of the planet.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, guys.
All right. Talk soon.
Wow. What a blast.
That was so fun. Thanks everyone for being here, for listening. For us, we have someone special on maybe once a month, and having JP Sears on was truly, truly special for us. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please share this with your friends, family, anyone that you think might benefit. And as always, thank you for listening to Illumination Podcast with Nick and Kizma.